Oh boy, this remains a pretty interesting market. We do not want to lose track of it because there are signs that the things are starting to shift in the market from what we've seen in the past couple of years. My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm a realtor in South Central Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. And today, we're going to be talking about the largest real estate market in the entire state of Alaska, and that is Anchorage. So this definitely is a market we need to keep a pretty close eye on, just because it can kind of serve as a canary in the coal mine for what's going on in the rest of the state usually. So before we get started, do make sure you make sure you do subscribe. If you have any questions, do make sure you post those in the comment section down below. And let's go and jump into today's market update, looking at the residential, the condo, and the multifamily market. Now, the first thing that we see is the number of properties available on the market. This time last year, it was 460. Now it's 436. So 460 was really low compared to the year before. Now we're seeing we have even less inventory now than what we saw the year before. The next thing that we're seeing is the number of properties that actually sold went from about 387 the year before to about 294 this past year. So that's something I really want to pay attention to, because the number of properties that actually sold just means the number of properties that actually went under contract and then eventually ended up closing. So that's a huge decrease. We haven't really seen a dramatic drop-off like that in the numbers here for quite a while. So that's significant. Is this going to have a big impact in the average sold price? Let's take a look. Now, what we're seeing is the average sold price, despite the fact the number of properties that actually sold went down so drastically, is that the average sold price still went up pretty aggressively. For example, average sold price this time last year was about $424,000. This year it's $457,000, which means we're sitting at, I think it's like a 7.8% average increase for the average sold price, which is actually more from what we saw the year before, because I think it was like a 6.8 or something like that this time last year. So despite the fact that we're seeing less homes selling, the fact that we have such a compressed inventory means that we are going to continue probably to see the pretty healthy appreciation for the homes here in the area, which is good if you're a buyer and if you're a seller. And the reason it's good for you if you're a buyer is because would you even want to buy a home if it looked like it was really soft and things were going to be volatile one way or the other? That's what makes Alaska's market a lot different from other places, is just because our markets are typically way less inclined to the dramatic ups and downs from what we've seen in other places. Really, the issue we have is if there's a huge crisis in oil like what we saw back in the 70s and part of the 80s as well. So that's going to be more our market. Now, let's go and take a look and see what's happening in the condo market. Now, in the condo market, we saw this time last year, there's about 244 condos that were available on the market. Now it's 127 condos are available right now on the market. So kind of continuing on with the trend we've seen throughout the year, where the inventory's been pretty much half of what it was the year before for the condo market. And I think that's because we see a lot of home buyers that are switching gears and thinking, hey, I'm tired of getting beat up in all these multiple offer situations. Let's just go check out a condo. There's a little less competition over there. So I think that's part of what we're seeing right now. Now, this time last year, we saw that there was about 157 condos that sold. This year, 118. Now again, let's take a look at the average sold price and see if this has had a detrimental impact in the average sold price for condos here in Anchorage. Now, the average sold price has actually gone from about 230 this time last year to about 242,000 this time this year. Now, that does also mean that we're seeing a bit of a slowdown at the rate at which things are increasing. This time last year it was about 6.3. Now we're seeing it's about 5.6, 5.2 if I recall correctly. So we're starting to see a pulling back at the rate at which things are increasing in the condo market, which is what we would expect really just across the board. Just with interest rates going up, we would expect to start seeing kind of a pulling back at the aggressive rate at which things are increasing. But just with the amount of demand we have right now, I'd be surprised to just see it fall off the face of the earth. And that's actually pretty good appreciation. You'll see me usually talking about high single digits or double digits when we're talking about the increase for the average sold price, looking at the residential market. But the reason people buy condos isn't really for the aggressive appreciation. It's more for the convenience, more so than anything else. So, most condo owners just kind of know that going into it. Now, before talking about the multifamily market, let's go ahead and take a quick break here. For those who've been watching for a bit, you know that I host the Alaskan Journey podcast. And if you haven't listened to it already, that's a podcast in which I interview people who've recently moved up here and people who have lived up here for years. And we talk about their authentic experiences and stories of coming up here. So if you want to hear from other people about what it's like being up here, then by all means, make sure you go check that out. And also, if you'd like a copy of your relocation guide for moving up here, do make sure you reach out to me on my website down below. Make sure you put relocation in the little comment section so I know what to send you. Now, let's go and talk about what's going on in multifamily properties here in Anchorage. So what we're seeing is that there was about 160 multifamily properties that were available this time last year. Now it's 72. So big drastic cut in the number of available multifamily properties here in Anchorage, and I think mostly that has to do with the fact that rents are way up, and when that happens, a lot of investors don't really want to let go of their income properties just because the margins start becoming better and better, because the taxes are going to go up, yes, and we expect that, but the rents going up covers over a whole host of sins and issues that you might have with everything else going on. So that's good for investors. So a lot of them are kind of holding on to their assets right now. Now, the number of properties that have actually sold in the multifamily sphere here in Anchorage has, not surprisingly, decreased. It went from about 57 this time last year, about 37 this past year. Now, considering the number of the drastic cut percentage-wise that we've seen for multifamily properties, that's actually proportionally for the properties that are available, 37 is doing pretty good. So there's still a really high demand for multifamily properties in Anchorage just because rents are up. The one thing I would caution investors right now is even though rents are up, that doesn't mean they're always going to stay that way. So if you're at a property that just barely scratches by in the numbers right now, just with the rents being so high, take a hard pass on that one. Let someone else handle that headache because we're not guaranteed the rents are always going to stay where they're at. And if you're just barely getting by off the numbers we have now, that might be a nasty surprise later. So let someone else have the big building where essentially you just have a bunch of roommates in there. I've seen a lot of those lately. Just because it's a multifamily does not mean it's going to cash flow. Do your math. Now, the next thing we're going to look at, this kind of has limited utility when we're talking about the multifamilies, just because it does include everything from the duplex all the way up to the big, commercial complex apartment building. But we do see the average sold price went up by about, I think it was $22,000, went from about $500,000 this time last year to about $500,000